Hello, Godot band community. This is Dr. Robert Grogan talking to you today with our next webinar, which is part of our series on band classroom management. And today we will be discussing accountability and intervention. So, to start with, a good way to think about accountability and intervention is to think about your classroom population in really three distinct tiers. Now, if you are familiar with the PBIS system, this is Positive Behavior and Intervention Supports, this might be familiar to you. So, thus far, we've already talked about our procedures and expectations. Now, when we make our procedures and expectations, we're really talking to this tier one grouping of children, which is predominantly who you teach. We want to think about where giving expectations and giving procedures to behaviors that we would like to see rather than what we would like not to see. However, this tier one expectation does not always work for all children in your classroom, and therefore we have this framework, the structure to demonstrate for tier 2 and tier 3. So tier 1 is band room systems for all students, your normal expectations and procedures. Tier 2, these are specialized systems for at-risk behavior. That's going to be roughly about 15% of your students. And tier 3 is customized systems for individuals that are high-risk students. So here's what some systems will look like. Again, we've already gone over tier 1. Those are your general expectations and procedures for your classroom. So tier 2, about 15% of your students might require some tier 2 accommodations. These could be preferential seating, check-in and check-out. What that is maybe you stand at the door, and as a child that might have some high-risk behaviors, maybe they're seldomly off task in your classroom, maybe there's some intermittent disruptions that happen daily. You greet them at the door. Hello, how are you doing today? Let's make sure we have a great day. You're checking in with them. At the end of the class, you check out with them. Did we make good decisions? We have that check-in and check-out. That's a pretty common tier 2 support system. Ongoing parent communication via emails, via phone calls home, behavioral intervention plans. Or you can create small groups of individuals. Certainly if you have some help in the room, if there's more than one band director in the room, that makes it a lot easier to do that. Tier 3. So this will be roughly 5% of your students, the minority of your students. The check and connect. So this is something a little bit more robust than the check-in and check-out. You get to know them, you schedule meetings with them, you schedule meetings with their parents, and they check in with you either weekly or daily. But it's more than just a brief check-in, check-out. Collaboration with the school counselor, social worker, or school therapist. Behavior reflection, so you have them reflect on their behaviors. This can also be a type of what's called restorative practice. And perhaps the most important with understanding any behavior is understanding the why behind the behavior. So let's talk a little bit about the why behind the behavior. There might be things going on at home that you might not know about that might explain a lot of the behaviors. Maybe the child has a difficult home life. Maybe there's difficult circumstances growing up. Maybe there's medical conditions. But asking yourself the why behind the behavior is usually your first step to approaching the situation with a lot of empathy as an educator. You need to be consistent with your accountability and interventions. If you have to intervene with a child's behavior, you must be resilient, but you have to be consistent and predictable. Students need to feel that it is more convenient for them to follow procedures and expectations than not to. It needs to be just easier in your class to play ball. However, behavioral interventions should never be petty. embarrassing, or without the possibility of learning or redemption. So some common behavioral interventions is redirection, proximity, walking close to the child, standing near the child, making eye contact. You can create a visual cue specific to the child that reminds them to self-monitor. It could be something as simple as walking up to them and tapping on their stand, or maybe making sure that they're making eye contact with you. But we are avoiding, the most important thing is we are avoiding at all costs trying to escalate the situation, having a verbal public confrontation, or embarrassing the child. Make sure that you are the most interesting thing happening in the room. This goes a long way. You need to be far more interesting than any electronic device or friends next to them. So something to think about if you're trying to capture their attention. As you saw in one of my earlier videos, one of our classroom expectations is for the students to give the podium 100% of their attention. Well, from my perspective, that more or less puts the onus on me, is I have to make sure that them giving them giving me their attention is worthwhile. Am I that interesting? So, here's a hierarchy of interventions. Try your best to avoid singling out students. But what you might want to do is think appropriate behaviors. Let's say there's a trumpet player that's not sitting correctly in their chair. So you would look at the child to the left and right of them. Thank you very much for sitting correctly. You're thanking those pro-social behaviors. Hopefully at that bottom step of the hierarchy, they're getting the hint and they correct their behaviors. This happens more often than not, and it happens especially with your general Tier 1 students. If they are not getting the hint, then you can make broad generalizations. Trumpets, we need to make sure that we're sitting correctly. So I'm still talking about behaviors that I want to see. I'm not saying don't slouch, don't do this, don't do that. I praised appropriate behavior, then I actually escalated it to the corrective action, which is still talking about what I want to see. After that, I would make eye contact. A lot of times I do that right on the first step. I would look left and right of the student and look at the student. Thank you, so-and-so. Thank you, so-and-so, for sitting correctly. And that goes a long way. We're not embarrassing anybody, but the student gets the hint. Making eye contact. And then if they persist, you issue the consequence. A consequence doesn't always have to be a phone call home or marking a behavior card, or I don't know if you have a point system at your school or not. It could be so-and-so, please sit correctly. But you have exhausted the steps, and you can say to the child afterwards, look, I tried to avoid calling you out in front of your friends. I thanked your friends for sitting correctly. I asked your whole section sit correctly. I made eye contact with you. You gave me no choice but to say, so-and-so, please sit correctly. And make sure that they understand that, and make sure that they understand that you were trying to let them save face for a good bit. And then you have that talk with them after class. So here are some common steps for following through with a behavioral intervention. The student action, the consequence, so-and-so do this, or the phone call home. The teaching moment. Now the teaching moment is, there's a theory called expectancy value theory, where students value the content and value the expectation a lot more if they understand the utility of it. So if they, for example, if they believe that they're getting assessed on something, they will value the content more. So if you pull that child aside and you say, here's why I really need you to sit up straight in your chair, because it expands the lungs, it opens up the rib cage, it makes you sound better, it makes our band sound better. Then you're adding utility to that. So what you give that teaching moment, you allow the child to correct the behavior, and which is redemption, and then you praise the corrected behavior. You have to come through with all of these for the child to really not just feel like they're just getting in trouble or that they're being singled out, but it's actually a learning moment and they're getting praised for the corrected behaviors. Consequences should never be just student action, consequence, student action, consequence. We have to allow for teaching moment, redemption, and praising the corrected behavior. We have one more video in this video series on classroom management. I've thoroughly enjoyed this series. Please let me know what you think in the comments, and please do not forget to follow this thread and these videos so you get notifications on these videos.